topic sort of hits close home to me. I grew up here in East Hampton. I remember the village as it used to be. Sort of mom and pop stores, Marley's, Brothers for Pizza, the Wilson Toy Store. Jen Wilson's here today. There's obviously been a lot of changes. That goes without saying. Storefronts that used to be these sort of mom and pops, where families would shop, have kind of been replaced by higher end stores. It's difficult to shop for families year round. There's empty storefronts, escalating rents, obviously problems that a lot of you are familiar with. We will be asking those questions today, and we hope to hear from you as well, and we'll of course introduce our panel in a moment. I would first like to thank some of our sponsors for these events. Rocco Carrera Wealth Partners has been one of our presenting sponsors. Thank you very much. Meredith is here today. The law offices of Toomey, Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Quartararo. They're represented over at this table today. Thank you very much for joining us. Also, the Adam Miller Group. Adam is here today with some of his colleagues. Brian, thank you very much. And Advantage Title, which actually just recently opened a new office right here on the corner of Newtown Lane and Main Street. And Amy Spiros is here with us today. Thank you very much, Amy. I would also like to thank LTV. They've been a great partner of ours. Michael Clark was with us today, who's the new executive director. They've been great friends of ours, and thank you very much to LTV for all their support. And now I'd like to turn things over to Joe, who will introduce our panel. Joe?
Thank you, Gavin. How's everybody doing today? This is our final one of 2020, correct? Our last Press and Express Sessions event of 2020. It's been very exciting for me. It's something that I've thought we needed to do for a very long time. The Express has been doing it for a couple of years now, and when we had the merger this summer, one of the great things that came out of that merger was the addition of press sessions. They've all been very successful so far, and I look forward to this one as well. I think this might be the biggest crowd we've had for a press session so far. It's obviously a topic that means a lot to everybody. So if you haven't participated in one of these or seen one yet, it works like this. We're going to go down the line. I'm going to introduce each of the panel members with a question that they've been given in advance so they could prepare an answer. And then we're immediately going to open it up for questions. This is meant to be a conversation. I'd ask everybody two things. One is, panel members and audience members, please be as brief as you can and concise so that we can get to as many topics as we can. If you have something to add to the conversation, whether you're on the panel or in the audience, please just catch my eye. Virginia Garrison, who is editor of the East Hampton Press, is going to be working the back of the room as well. So if you just catch our eye, we'll make sure you become part of it. And the second thing is, if you'll see how I'm talking into the microphone, this is how everybody needs to do it. It can't be down. It can't be down here. It's got to be right here in front of your mouth. I was told a fist away. So that's the two things we ask. So today's topic is about the future of East Hampton Village with a heavy emphasis on the business district. And the big question is, how can year-round vitality be restored to East Hampton Village? The loss of mom and pop shops has been mourned for decades, but even many of the current high-end shops are shutting their doors, leaving little to entice visitors or even year-rounders to spend time and money in the village business district in the colder months. Would creating year-round apartments in the village or installing a sewer system help to solve that problem? Would loosening village regulations on events and live music help? Would adding more parking liven things up? Or is this issue simply a function of high rents and a seasonal economy? That's going to be the topics we try and dive into today, along with anything anybody wants to bring up with the panel. So we'll start to my left. Robert Rattenni is an owner of commercial properties in the village's business district. I guess you're representing the landlords in the village. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Which businesses do your properties house? Do they stay open year-round? What do they sell? And what do you find to be the most and least problematic issues for landlords, merchants, restaurants? Is it parking? Is it the limited seasonal customer base? Is it high costs?
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So to start with your first question, some of the stores that I have, in no particular order, J. Crew is one of them, I'll start with the larger ones first. J. Crew, and because I know there's a mix of national and locally owned and operated. So we have J. Crew and Restoration Hardware, which I'll address one issue with that because they sometimes get a bad rap being a national tenant. The pros, I believe, of a national store is that, and those two in particular stay open about 364 days a year. They employ, local people, and they have the related benefits that a store such as them can have that some locally owned and operated stores can't. That being said, I also have many locally owned and operated businesses, from Bonwy to Turpan, and that whole property there that's adjacent to the RRL store, the old barn building. As I was speaking with Paul, while they may not necessarily serve the local community, so on and so forth, with their product mix, they are a locally owned and operated business. I believe that whole demographic, if you want to call it that, has shifted a bit. For instance, I'll tell a quick story that I had the last locally owned and operated shoe store in this community. Luciano's shoe store. It was many years ago. I was there when I bought the building. That was in 1994. Approximately 5 years later, he left. True story. He was paying less money when he left than when I bought the property. It's a long story as to why, but he was, in fact. Some of those businesses don't really translate to today's day and age for many reasons, and I'm sure you guys can all figure it out. I don't need to tell you, between people not repairing shoes, things like that, and that's just one shoe business. So that was one thing. I have some stores on Newtown Lane, the tenant store, which for many years was Calypso, has been tenant now for the last few, so that's the mix of it. What do I find as the biggest challenges? No particular order again. I've been coming out here since the mid-'80s, and I've been living full-time since 1989, so it's 30 years now. I've seen it change dramatically. The community was, in my opinion, a heck of a lot more fun 30 years ago than it is today. Granted, a lot of us were a lot younger then too, but that's a separate issue. I've made some notes here, so
maybe you should define fun. How is it more fun?
Well, no, that's a good question, and I'm glad you did, because I did make some notes, and I want to say how I feel about that. When I started in business, which was right when I started out here, the local administration was what I call very user-friendly. You could go in, you could speak to them, you could explain what you wanted to do, and it was listened. I mean, we're a very small community still, even by today's standards. We're still a very small community. So we were able to do that. That has changed dramatically over the last 30 years, where when you walk into Village Hall now, with some exceptions, you are looked upon as if everything you're trying to do is, just no, and you want to build a skyscraper on Main Street. That's not necessarily the case. Small things, and it's even shifted over to, I live right in the middle of the village. I live above one of my properties, so I see it every single day. And I have spoken to the administration, I've spoken to the police department, and I try to be very, very constructive. When Jerry was the police chief, we used to have conversations all the time, and I always told him, I said, you know what, I'm going to tell you when it's right, and I'm going to tell you when it's wrong. And there was no agenda to it. It was just, I live here, my kids have grown up here. I wanted it to be the best place it could possibly be. It is changed over to the police department with the parking situation. It's become incredibly adversarial for no particular reason. There's no reason for it, in my opinion. It's not a welcoming situation. People come into the community. I'll tell a really quick story again. Just a few weeks ago, the entrance to the Roy Deshan lot off of Newtown Lane had a ticket. The bag was over the booth, the ticket machine. The first assumption anyone's going to make is, well, they're not taking tickets today. Sure enough, they were taking tickets because the other side was open. They didn't let anybody know. I mean, you can't. I tried to speak to everybody It fell upon deaf ears. Just a small example. I don't want to take up more time. Last night we had a meeting at the Baker House. Jerry hosted that. There were some ideas that came up. A few people that are here today made comments, and we talked about a few things. There's so many small little things that can be done. Why can a place like the Palm Restaurant or Jenny's here from Hedges Inn, why can they not have a piano bar in their restaurant to do it? I went to dinner in Sag Harbor a month ago at the American Hotel. There's a piano bar. It's a piano bar, not a rock concert, a piano bar, okay? And people are having fun and enjoying themselves. It's part of why people always have come out here forever. Not to mention the fact that this has always been considered an artistic community, both musically, literary, so on and so forth. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So I think things like that, there was maybe one or two other little things I just wanted to mention. I do believe, from a health department issue, I think a sewer system would be a great enhancement, because Sag Harbor is, but I continue to insist that it's because they have bars and restaurants, and people go out and, again, have fun. And I think I've made my point.
I want to make it clear. We'll come back to you to touch on some of those topics, too. You're going to, as I said, I think you're going to be speaking for property owners in the village on the panel, so that'll be good to do. Okay, then we'll move on to Philip O'Connell, who works in real estate as the managing director of Halstead Hamptons. Philip, as a lifelong resident of East Hampton Village and the managing director of the Hamptons market for Halstead Real Estate, with an office directly across the street, by the way, what trends have you seen over the last several decades in terms of the village business district specifically, and the viability of running a locally owned business today? What are the biggest challenges that commercial tenants have to overcome?
Can everybody hear me? All right. Thank you for having me. I think the biggest hurdle for tenants, not only here, because Southampton has the same problem with a lot of vacancy in the winter and in the summer, and even you're seeing it in New York City with a lot of vacancy, is the increasing rents. The rents go up typically when the property changes hands and the purchaser has to charge an according rent. These landlords aren't making a ton of profit. They're making a couple of points. So that's one of the biggest challenges to the locally owned business, that and the fact that so many people now shop online. The only way you can decrease rents without government intervention, I feel, is by increasing the supply, which would be increasing the commercial corridor in the village of East Hampton. I'm sure some people would want to hang me for that. And perhaps putting together an incentive program where buildings that don't have a second or third floor could add a second or third floor, which would allow for additional office space and additional apartments. One of the ways to create an incentive without would be to provide a 15-year tax abatement on those increased value additions. That would get people to do it. Another way is to only open the window for a very short time, maybe perhaps for 5 years, so landlords would take advantage of that. So that's a couple of my thoughts. Some of the challenges would be complying with the parking regulations by adding that additional square footage, in addition to complying with the septic flow rates, which will be a challenge, but I know the village is attempting to address many of those issues, both the parking and the septic. So I see a bright future for the village, but everybody's got to kind of pitch in and be there for it. So that's my brief statement.
Thank you, Philip. Steve Haweeli is Vice President of the East Hampton Chamber of Commerce and owner of the WordHampton public relations firm. Steve, what's your experience of the village's climate or culture from the perspective of a member of the Chamber of Commerce? As someone whose PR firm has many restaurants as clients, including many outside the village, what do you think could make life easier for restaurants that operate within the village? And do you think more restaurants would add more life to the village?
Well, I certainly, first of all, thanks for having me, Joe. It's a wonderful crowd, and thanks for the great food here at Rowdy Hall. Mike's not on? How about this?
Well, he said so many nice things, too.
I know, right?
Yeah.
How about this? Oh, boy, okay. So thank you for having me, Joe, and the rest of the Southampton Press gang. And thank you all for being here. Great food from Rowdy. Thank you, Joe. So I do believe that more restaurants and bars in the village would be certainly bring life to it. So we would need an additional sewer system, more capacity. I know that the chamber has worked hard in the last 3 years. We have a recently resurrected chamber. So it took us a while to get the approval to have a street fair on Newtown Lane. So that was very, very popular. Brings people back into town. There will be a night market on December 7th from 4:30 to 8 in our village. We're going to close off Newtown and I think part of Maine. I'm not sure. No, not just Newtown Lane. So that's going to be fun. It might be a little bit cold, but I think it's bringing people back to the village. Just from an overall observation of representing restaurants from Manhattan to Montauk, and including Westchester, we see all municipalities dragging their feet when it comes to basic approvals and permitting, and that's just a real challenge for restaurateurs. It's a deterrent to do business. And even putting a sign up is an issue in this town. So there's a lot of change that needs to be enacted, and I'm certain that Jenny can speak to the music issue at the Hedges Inn. And why can't the Palm have a piano bar, as Bobby said? So I'm just glad to be here and glad to contribute to this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So let's talk to a restaurateur. Joe Realmuto is the executive chef of Honest Man Restaurant Group, which owns a number of restaurants throughout East Hampton town, including Rowdy Hall. At first glance, it seems that having a restaurant in a centralized downtown area like this would be ideal, or at least better than on the highway or somewhere else. Here you have more people walking to shops, movies, and so on. So in theory, they're more likely to stop in spontaneously than at a remote location. Do you still find that to be the case?
Actually, it's quite the opposite because of some of the hurdles that we have. You know, the parking. If you look at, we have 5 restaurants in the Hamptons, all within 5 miles. Coche Commodore, which just opened, La Fondita, Town Line Barbecue, Rowdy Hall, and Nick and Tony's. And if you look at our restaurant group outside of Rowdy Hall, who you can't necessarily walk to, our business in the summertime is a lot busier than we are here in town, where you would think people are actually walking and shopping. But the problem we deal with is people can't park. And if they could park somewhere, they're parking for a short period of time. They got to be in and out. And at the end of the day, this really isn't a walking town. If you look at some of the surrounding towns like Sag Harbor, which on my days off in the summertime or spring or fall, that's where I will go and visit restaurants. You could have dinner, you could go to a bar, you could walk, you could do a little shopping in between. But if you look at the businesses in East Hampton, by 6 o'clock they're shut down. The only thing in this town besides, you know, the restaurants and the movie theater is the ice cream parlor. You know, so I feel like we really need to kind of bring more, and the Chamber's done a really good job so far of bringing more into. We have some great spaces here in town. Herrick Park, the park across the street from Nick and Tony's, across from the post office. I think we need to bring more events into those areas to draw more people into our town, so that they go there, they visit the event, and then they visit the town as well. You know, they do some shopping, they spend money in the stores, they come to the restaurants. You know, so that's some of the hurdles we deal with being right here in town.
Interesting. Okay. Jerry Larsen is a former East Hampton Village Police Chief and is a candidate for Village Mayor in 2020. Jerry, you campaign that over the last 30 years, the village has become a land of no, and that the commercial core must be revitalized so that year-round working families can earn a living. How do you propose to achieve that?
All right. Thank you all for being here and having me. I'm honored to be up here. I did choose to run for mayor, and Sandra, my running mate over there, choose to run with me. We have a lot of positive ideas, and when I first decided to run, I went to Barbara Layton, who's been a long-time owner of a local restaurant, and I have an idea that I wanted to set up a business meetings so we could start to hear the problems firsthand, and then we can start to formulate the solutions. Our first meeting was held in October at Babette's, thanks to Barbara, and we had a great turnout of not only business owners, but we had a lot of residents, which was also great. Last night we had our second event, which was hosted by the Baker House, and we had another great turnout, a lot of conversation, and a lot of great ideas are starting to emerge. So we're really happy with that. We're formulating plans because if I'm elected, we're going to hit the ground on July 1st. That's when the administration would change, and we want to enact as many laws as we can to get the summer season in. Some of the ideas, let me just jump back to the Village of No. I didn't create that term. That term's been around for a long time. That term existed when I was chief of police, and I'll tell you a quick funny story. There was a code enforcement officer who worked in the village hall. He's retired now, so I won't get him in trouble. On the front page, he had inserted a page, and it just said no. So every time you would go in there and you'd ask a question, he would open the book and just show you the book. And it was a funny thing. But being serious, we have some major problems. The businesses are dying. The businesses are asking for help. And we have some ideas that we could do immediate. I think to bring life back is going to take time. It's going to take short-term plans. It's going to take long-term plans. Some of the short-term plans that I see right away is we could immediately institute outdoor seating at our restaurants that already exist, Golden Pear, Sam's. All we have to do is pass a law that it would allow them to use public sidewalk, just like they did in Sag Harbor. And they reduce the number of seats inside. That keeps the flow rate the same. So that doesn't hurt anything, and it brings more life back to the community. We could allow music back into our restaurants and taverns, and that would draw people into town. The stores, people say the stores are not staying open because why would they stay open? There's nobody to shop. If we start bringing people back into the community, we could start, the stores would then stay open. It's like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? But that's the concept. You have to start making a walking village, and you can start bringing people back into the village, and that would help. Another short-term goal. There's certain buildings right now that are applying for situations similar to like Golden Pear or I think the Juice Press. That one's public, so I can say that. But it's just a matter of changing the zoning code. They already meet the sewer requirements. Just change the zoning code to allow them. In Bob's case, he has to have an easement to put the sewer system on village property. I think I'm correct, right, Bob? That's all that would take. Then the juice press could make their juice on premise and have a place where people can congregate. And there's other places that are going to be applying soon, and they have sewer approval from the county. All we have to do is change the wording in the zoning code, and we could have those uses. So it's not that hard to start changing these small things to start bringing life back. The long-term goals or plans obviously would be more involved. We definitely need the sewer system. I have a plan that we can put a sewer system in. I have a way to pay for it that won't use current taxpayer money. I'm going to reveal that plan after the first of the year. We're going to improve the parking system as well. That will be released after the first of the year. So we need the sewer system. We also need to update the comprehensive plan. We have a comprehensive plan that's almost 20 years old. It needs to be updated so that we can have a new roadmap where residents, where business owners, where everybody wants to go, where this village needs to go. We also need to increase the availability, the inventory, if you will, of mom and pop stores and second and third floor apartments. So there's a lot of work to do, but it can be all done. And we have the plan to move forward. And the zoning code is one of the biggest problems we have in this community right now that inhibits business. The historic inns, which are beautiful places. We were in Baker House last night. If you haven't been there, you need to go. It's a wonderful place. the Hedges Inn, everybody is being damaged by not being able to expand their certain uses and little things. They're not asking for the moon. They're asking for little things to make their businesses successful. And God forbid we lose those historic inns. They're wonderful locations. They're beautiful to drive down Main Street and you see those. And it would be an absolute shame to see them as to go back to personal homes. Those are my ideas. I'm going to pass it on. I'm certainly more than happy to get into more detail as we go. But
Thank you, Jerry. Jenny Lilja is the general manager and chef at the Hedges Inn. The inn sued the village this year after the village decided that it could not host outdoor events such as weddings, which were an important part of the business. Jenny, what has happened to the inn since then in terms of the health of the business? And what is the status of the lawsuit? And also, has the historic nature of the inn and the surrounding neighborhood been a piece of this problem?
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? So I wanted to say thank you first for including me as a representative, I think, for the inns. Sometimes it feels like we're our own little unit. We're not really included in the business sort of happenings, but I think we're a major piece of the puzzle here in solving this vitality issue. So I'm happy to be here and appreciate the seat here. I just want to give a little bit in the way of background. So I took over the Hedges as the GM in 2015. At that point, the inn had not been profitable under its current ownership, which bought the inn in 2007. And it had stayed that way until we took over, my husband and I, at the end of 2015. We decided to bring the existing event revenue in-house. So we were doing the catering and the event management, the service, and all that kind of stuff in-house, which brought some revenue in for us. We doubled our event revenue in 2016, and it continued to grow from there. I bring that up to say that at the time our weddings were shut down, that revenue accounted for over 30% of our annual sales. And not having that for the last 2 years, we will be unprofitable for the first time since then, which is frustrating professionally for me and sort of sad to see. So in the 2 years since the weddings were canceled, we've incurred over $1 million in losses. That's potential, revenue projections, as well as legal and all that kind of stuff. But it's mostly the loss of revenue. We've already lost our business potential for 2020. We're on the verge of losing it for 2021 for the spring. Weddings are planned so far in advance. So that's the kind of reality of this whole lawsuit. I'm very fortunate that the owners of the Hedges want to continue the fight, the good fight we call it, but they're fighting to protect their property rights. They're fighting to protect their investment, but more so than any of those things, it's the principle, of the restrictions that are being passed down to everyone, not just to us. So we're in the state Supreme Court now. These things can drag on for years and years and years. It's draining financially, emotionally, and like I said, it's professionally very frustrating for me. Sort of a silver lining here is that I like to think that the situation at the Hedges and the sort of outrage that's, I hear from people around town has brought a lot of attention to this issue. I think it sort of sparked the conversation in a lot of ways. So, that's a good thing, right? So the other part of your question was in regards to the historic nature of the neighborhood and the inn. I think, you're hinting at a zoning issue. We're a pre-existing non-conforming use. We're a commercial in a residential neighborhood, which is really just like words, I think, used to sort of restrict our rights and our uses. The comprehensive plan, which Jerry was talking about a little bit, in black and white, on paper, aims to shutter pre-existing non-conforming businesses. we are not allowed to expand. The inns in particular are not allowed to do any kind of updates that you would expect of a modern hotel facility. Obviously keeping the historic nature of the buildings, but our travelers expect those certain amenities, and we are not allowed to expand in any kinds of ways like that. So the historic nature of the neighborhood, I don't think it's a hindrance. I think, you know, the anti-business sort of culture coming out of this board is the hindrance. The zoning code is archaic, it's rigid, it's restrictive, it's outdated, it needs to be rewritten. And I think that's really at the core of most everyone's problems here. So,
Okay.
that's
Thank you, Jay. So now, Rick Lawler has been an East Hampton Village board member since 2008, and he is the current deputy mayor. So, Rick, in what ways have you seen the village's commercial district change over the years, and what do you think are achievable ways to bring year-round life to the village? And what are the obstacles? Is it high rents, a seasonal population? Where's their hope in this?
Okay, so first of all, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to a robust discussion here so that we can maybe come to some agreements about what we can do to invigorate the village commercial district. I also want to remind you that the village is 80 to 85% residential, so it is a balancing act. And I had some statement prepared, which I'll go through quickly, and then I'd love to have an opportunity to address some of the issues that have been raised from the village's point of view. So first, let me say that I've lived here my whole life, and so I'm very familiar with the mom and pop stores that used to be. In many cases, the business owner actually lived above his store. You knew him personally. He or she knew your family. I can relate to the Luann shop. Probably nobody here remembers that. But my parents and I used to go into there to shop. You socialize with these people on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. If you walked into there, they knew exactly what you wanted, what your size was. So you were in and out in a few minutes. You felt a bond with them. The barber, which is now going out of business, but was only a stone's throw from here. If I walked into there, he knew me by name. He knew exactly how I wanted my hair cut, which nowadays it's not too hard for anybody to figure out what I need. But back then I did have some hair, and it became almost a social thing because he'd ask you how your family was. You'd ask about his family, and so you actually looked forward to going to get a haircut. You looked forward to be downtown because you knew everybody. Unfortunately, with the rise of corporations that have come into town, I just feel like some of the businesses just don't have the pulse of the community, and I think that's a big issue. I'm not quite sure how you solve that. But as an example, years ago, Diamond's Furniture Store, I don't know if any of you remember that, used to have a Santa Claus in the window, which would attract parents and the children, bring them in, and they had a recliner raffle. So it was a big draw for everyone. So they'd come down and you'd buy a raffle ticket to win the recliner, and then, of course, you'd go from there to the other stores. They had things like, it was kind of like Monopoly money. I think it was called Santa Bucks or Big Bucks. I don't know what it was. I don't remember the name of it. But if you shopped in a store and you say shopped in a store in the village, you spent $100, you get $5 worth of this Monopoly type money called Santa Bucks or whatever it was. And you could spend that in any store that was participating in the village. And they all participated. They were all members of the Chamber of Commerce then. And it seemed like the Chamber of Commerce was really working for them. I think in recent years, the Chamber kind of fell by the wayside, but I see a resurgence of that in the last few years, and I think that we, as a village, have worked well with the Chamber to do what we can to promote activity here. This Christmas parade and the lighting of the windmill and the street fair on Newtown Lane is the result of a meeting between village board committee members. There were 2 members assigned to a committee, myself being one of them, who met with Glenn Vickers and Mike, I see you in the back, representing the Chamber of Commerce, and I think that they'll attest to the fact that it was a very useful, helpful, cooperative meeting. We tried to eliminate as many obstacles as we could, and as a result, I think it's going to kick off and be a wonderful affair, and very useful to bringing people into the village district. Now, the next part of my question was, what do you think are achievable ways to bring year-round life to the village? First, let me say this isn't unique to the village, this situation, because it's going on all over the East End. It's going on in the communities further west. I recently read an article where Lindenhurst is having the same situation. So it's not unique to us. And if the answer were easy, it would be solved already. So we know that it's not an easy answer. But I think part of what we're doing as a village board, and will continue to do, continue to have street fairs. Just so that you know, Barbara Borzak and myself are the ones that pushed for the street fairs about three years ago. So it's not like we've been resistant to it. So as a result of that, we've started out with Spring Fair, closing down Newtown Lane. It's progressed into the Fall Fair, and we had an event this summer, and then, of course, the Christmas event coming up. So I can tell you that we're right on par with what other villages in the surrounding area are doing. Most of them are doing about 4 large events in which they close down streets a year, and that's what we're up to. So it's not like we've been remiss in our trying to help the business community in that way.
Rick, can I interrupt for a second? I'm over here.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Jenny just talked about the village government being anti-business, and you've talked about some of the things that the village has done to work with businesses. Mm-hmm. There's a difference in perception pretty clearly.
Absolutely.
How do you respond to that, the concern that the actual merchants in the village, some of them believe that the village government is working against them?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I think the situation with the pre-existing non-conforming inns, it's difficult for me to talk about because, as Jenny knows, we're involved in litigation. So I just can't really talk about that much. I want to remind everybody that there is a change in the board starting very soon in about 6 weeks. I am certainly open to having discussions, but none of that can happen until the litigation has been completed and we see what happens there. After all, we have an obligation, as I said, to our residential constituents as well as commercial. And if you've ever lived next to a group rental house that has activity going all day long, and you can see how aggravating it could be, and then you buy a home, let's say, near a pre-existing, non-conforming, quaint old inn, and realize that maybe it's not that way or it doesn't want to be that way anymore, you can see how it would upset a lot of residents. So it's a balancing act for us, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a solution. Nobody is going to get everything that they want. That's one thing I've learned in government. It's all about compromise. So I think that it is possible to maybe have some compromise here, and that's well worth talking. And I think you'll find that after the first of the year, there'll be plenty of opportunity to have discussions with village board members and form a committee and research it. But I will tell you this, I don't see anything happening until it's well vetted among our constituents in the community. So that would be a prerequisite of mine. I'm not anti-business. I happen to own a business, a small business. I've lived here my whole life. I've seen what's happening, and I would like to improve it too. But on the other hand, I don't want to go off, half-cocked and have something happen that's going to change this town and make it, I hate to refer it to Montauk, but I don't think any of us want that situation here. Okay. So I think taking it slow, baby steps at a time, and I think that maybe we can come to some agreement that might be helpful to the business community and still keep residents happy with what's going on.
Okay, I want to open it up to the audience to ask questions. Okay. Jerry, I can give you just a real brief moment to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up real quick on Rick's comments that, Rick, you voted to shut the weddings down 12 days before the wedding. you're talking about being reasonable. It should have been more thought out and let the Hedges know that, they were going to shut the weddings down. I mean, you don't do something like that to somebody's wedding. So I hear what you're saying. I think everybody hears what you're saying, but it doesn't show in how you vote. And I think, we need to be more truthful about what we're talking about. And all of a sudden in January, when the mayor resigns, all of a sudden there's going to be some leeway to help business. How does that work? Why isn't the board a majority? If you wanted to change something, can't you vote on it now?
Okay, let's give Jerry. Let's give Rick a chance to respond.
Okay. First, I didn't think this was going to be a campaign event, but as long as it's turning into that, let's tell the real truth. Let's tell the real truth. Let's tell the real truth. All right. The fact of the matter is, the village was kind enough to permit the Hedges Inn to have several events a summer, and the village did issue a few special permits for those events. And that had been going on for some time, as far as I knew. That was handled by the village administrator, and those permits were issued. What you're talking about is a situation that I had no knowledge of until that public meeting, and I don't think any other board member did either, when we were confronted with the fact that the Hedges Inn had scheduled 5 wedding events without ever requesting a special permit, which they knew they were required to do, which was way above what had been requested in the past. We were surprised at that hearing. We heard everybody's complaints, and right after that meeting, I'm the one that insisted that we were going to do something to make this right. We had our attorney, our village attorney, meet with the Hedges attorneys. There was a solution, an amenable agreement made. All of those events went on as scheduled. It wasn't in the Hedges building. It was in a different location behind the Hedges, and they all went on as scheduled. I happen to be personal friends with one person who had an event there, who was totally happy with what happened. And sure, was it very stressful in the beginning? Exactly. I put on a wedding for my daughter. I know how stressful it is. And that is why I'm the one that insisted we make this right as soon as we could, and we did. And so everybody should know that.
I would argue that this is we don't want to get bogged down on one issue, but I do want to give Jenny one chance just to give the final word on this.
Thank you. So your kind and amenable sort of solution was at the cost of our owners to the tune of $100,000, moving the 4 weddings to private property. The owners of the Hedges own 6 of the 7 abutting properties to the Hedges. So thankfully, we had that property to use at our cost. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the Hedges has been obtaining permits for tented events for at least the last 20 years. They have been approved by the board. They have been inspected by the fire inspector, and they have been held there for decades. We are not required previously, until this new law appeared, to seek a special permit for events within our building. So we did anyway, because the police would show up and say, "What are you doing?" And we'd have the note from the village administrator saying that we were not required to get a special permit. So we had been having 4 events, as we had been having for decades prior, with the approval of the board. And the amenable solution was a solution by the owners of the Hedges and had no influence on any goodwill coming down from that board.
Okay.
I have to respond to that. That is absolutely not true.
Okay. Wait, I think
No, it isn't.
I think that we should move on to a little
I
bit
think we
more
should, too.
constructive conversation.
That's fine. We have questions in the audience.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm wondering if someone would like to speak about the nature of seasonality and part-time residents here. My understanding is that the majority of the population is part-time now, and maybe are we realistic to talk about mom and pop stores at this point? Maybe Robert, you would like to address that?
Thank you. Hello. I do think for various reasons, as I touched on briefly before, the mom and pop situation is sort of, I mean, that's in the past, and that's not going to happen any longer. And that's not just this community, it's everywhere. Again, I have the vast majority of my tenants, probably I would say 3/4 of my tenants in this village are locally owned and operated. So I'm not saying, I don't know, that's what I can say about that. The seasonality is something that I think has become a little bit more noticeable lately. As the population and the demographics have changed in the community and it's aged to a degree, and some of it's due to expense. I mean, homes, when they transfer in the historic districts and so on and so forth, they're transferring, we all know what the numbers are. You're not going to get a 25-year-old to buy those homes. And so that's changing. Something that I am not particularly familiar with, and it's not sort of what I want to do, but I see people my age group who are now spending half the year in Florida. I mean, when I first started coming out here, Thanksgiving was a huge week out here, the entire week, because all the New York City schools were out. Everybody would come out and spend a week, and that was a big thing, kick off to the holidays. I think we've lost a little bit of that, and I think some of it is due to some laws that are greater than this particular community is really dealing with. It's New York State laws, taxes, so on and so forth. That's what I'm told. Some of the real estate brokers in the audience can probably touch on that a little bit better than I, but I think that's a little part of it. And it really does seem to have become, when I first came out here, it was very seasonal, and a lot of stores used to close. And I don't remember everybody getting all up in arms about it. It changed dramatically where many of them stayed open. And one of the parts of my question was how many of mine stay open. The vast majority actually do. I've worked very hard to try to get that to be the case. It's become harder in the last, say, 5 years, I would say, give or take. But still, the vast majority are. But it is becoming more difficult, and I feel like we've gone back to some seasonality that was here 30 years ago.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree that it's seasonality, but when you talk about 85%, you're talking about the village, and that's what Rick was referring to, the village itself. But this restaurant that we're sitting in is an exclusive for village residents. Town residents use our village as much or as more as than we do. So you have to have an open mind, and I think there is a way to create mom and pop shops. I think we should take some property that's further away near the train station, and we could convert that to mom and pop stores, and we could put second and third floor apartments above it and make those workforce housing, make them 2-bedroom apartments, so that we could start creating families again in the village. We don't even have kids in this village anymore. There's no kids. I mean, very few. I'm not going to say no. But there's very few children in our community. I mean, who are we bringing up to live here? So, yes, we have 85% second homeowners in the village, but the town still shares our village. So we can make it vital. We can make it year-round.
Okay,
Can I just explain that we are already doing that? We have already okayed 2 workforce apartments on Lumber Lane. The holdup has been the county with that. It's not us. We okayed it already. It's all set to go as far as we're concerned. So the holdup has been on the county health department.
So we can agree that's part of the equation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's what
Questions
we're trying
from the
to do.
audience. I think.
Okay, hi, my name is Nancy Atlas. I live out here. I'm a professional musician. And a little known fact is that when I was 15, I worked at Paper Place on Main Street with John Carlo Filippi, who is also another musician out here. I love the fact that we're all talking about this, and I'd love to commend the press group for putting it together, because this is exactly how things change. So I just want to start by saying that. So many things, I'll try to keep it brief, but you can't expect Robert to give up high-end storefronts in his business for mom and pops. I don't think that's fair to him. But as somebody that spent her life bringing people into our community for fun, I do think that the arts and the music are underappreciated for the value that they bring to this community. And as somebody who was personally asked to play Herrick Park the first summer, as they're trying to revitalize this town, I couldn't do it. And it wasn't because of my schedule, it was because of my conscience. Because there is no way that I'm going to play in a park and bring my band for how much money you want to offer me if I am not legally allowed to play here in the off season. It is incredibly hard as a musician to make their living. So I think that we really need to continue this discussion. And also, you know, if I told you there was a stock that existed that was 100% guarantee that it was going to bring people and vitality and money back into this town, you would buy that stock. And I'm telling you, after 25 years of doing it, that stock is live music. All right? It is live music, and it's your restaurants. It's your restaurants. You know why I come to Rowdy Hall? Because I know Mark Smith. And because when I'm here, it's a family. We have to get back to what a community is here. And, you know, that includes having J. Crew and these people that offer beautiful things. But maybe there's a way that the town can subsidize a place that has a five and dime or something, and that brings the children back. And if you want to use an example of it, look at Sag Harbor and the fireside sessions, which we do. Every Saturday, 300 people come into that town. They go out to dinner, they buy gas, and that trickles down to their waitress, that trickles down to the community, so it exists. And thank you for giving me that.
I want to go to Joe and Steve to answer this question. This is a fair point that other communities not far away offer live music. Do you think that's a key element of what we're talking about bringing vitality back to the village?
Absolutely. Music, farmers markets, artist markets, it just brings people into town. And when they come into town, they want to eat, they want to shop, they want to drink, and it does. It just trickles down all the way down to the bus people, the dishwashers, the people that work and live in this town year round, not just the seasonal people.
Steve, do you have anything to add there?
Well, yes. I mean, I spent a fair amount of time up the island, so you look at Patchogue, Sayville, Islip, Babylon, certainly Sag Harbor, Port Jefferson. These are walking towns. These are villages I would love to live in or live close to because they're walking towns, and they all have bars and restaurants. And so, yes to music and restaurants, and yes to more live music. And you know, that's what the chamber, like, you know. The festivals and to get access to Herrick Park was monumental, by the way. To actually use the park was a monumental accomplishment that was executed by Steve Ringel, our executive director at the time. So if you went to one of those festivals, it was fantastic because you see people that you hadn't seen in 5 years or 3 years or even 10 years. So, and there was music going all day long. So to Nancy's point, the stock that I would want to buy would be the arts and culture stock with a heavy dose of music.
Can I just say one other thing? This is East Hampton. This is not Lindenhurst. This is not Kansas. You have a moral obligation to be supporting the arts. I'm not telling you guys. I know we're bored, but we have a obligation in our generation to be supporting our artists, and it will bring in, it's the essence of this town. So, sorry.
Okay.
Couldn't agree more.
No worries. We have a question up here. Let me try and get to you without knocking everything down.
I'm Hal Zwick. I work in commercial real estate out here across all the communities for about 15 years. And, you know, one of the examples to give is, look what happened with the clubhouse that opened up 2 years ago. The bowling alley that used to be here had trouble as far as what they wanted to do for expansion or to renovate. Scott Rubenstein worked for 15 years to build a complex that has entertainment, that has a bowling alley, has an arcade, has music 3 to 4 nights a week. That's not allowed in the village. I know for a fact that's taken away business from a lot of the local restaurants, especially on a year-round basis, because it's allowed, you know, outside of the village, and it's taken away from other businesses. To Nancy and everybody's point, that you look at Sag Harbor as the example, and as Jerry has said, the solution is the sewer system. The reason that there are people in Sag Harbor is there are 15 restaurants and 12 takeouts. The sewer system allows that. we have maybe 1/3 of the food entities in East Hampton. That's what attracts people. And before we, that is the solution, that and the parking. And that's something that has been spoken about for years. And it just can't, there needs to be a game plan that's enacted quickly.
Can I just respond to that?
Before, can I come back to you, Rick? I just want to give Philip a chance to talk about a sewer system and what that might mean for the commercial business district.
Well, the sewer system would make a significant difference. You're talking about you could now have apartments, you could now expand your density, you could have additional restaurants. As we all know, that restaurants have the highest septic flow. I know that a lot of the restaurants in towns are pumped every couple of days in the summertime, right? So that would be, it would be a significant impact. I also know the village has commissioned a study on the feasibility of a sewer district and where that would be. So the village is moving in the right direction. They understand the problem and they're looking for a solution. Providing a sewer system is not an overnight, it's not an overnight solution. You really have to study it, figure out how to finance it, what areas you need to place it in. You're talking about miles and miles of pipe. You're talking about pumping stations. These are, that's why you need a study. And thankfully, the village is moving in that direction. They understand what's going on. They understand that Sag Harbor is a good model and something to move towards. So once you have that sewer system, you could take, for instance, Rudishan Lot, which there's a significant number of septic systems under there. It's not a sewer system. It's a septic system just like you have in your backyard. You remove those septic systems, you can do probably one level underground parking and then a street level or maybe just 2 or 3 feet up so that now you've doubled your parking over there. That's, again, there's an expense associated with that, but it's worth it because it gets people in and out of the village. You can also do the same thing over on the long-term lot over by the school in the Y. So.
Okay, one second. I just do want to give, Rick's been patient. I do want to give him a chance to say.
What Phil is talking about is this request for proposal, which is dated July of this year, which means this was started months and months before this date came out. So this is Nelson Pope. I think we'll have a public presentation of this, and I think in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. Our next meeting, I believe, or the meeting after that, and which it addresses many of the issues that we've been talking about here. So the village board has been very concerned about this, and we're trying to do what we can to improve it. But when you're talking about government, and when you have to hire specialists to advise you on this sort of thing so that we don't go off in the wrong direction and spend a lot of money uselessly, then it takes time. So this should be presented at a public hearing, as I said, in the next few weeks, so you'll get a better idea of what we're doing. But this has to do with things, just quickly, I'll tell you what it's going to deal with. Recommendations are expected to include refinements to the code, which we've been talking about, implementation of design guidelines for site development, new policies or programs to encourage year-round vibrancy in commercial areas, and an analysis of where housing units may be feasible to support year-round workforce population.
So it's a lot of the things we're talking about.
On this for some
things
time.
we're talking about. Okay, we have about a half hour left, and we want to end at 2 o'clock if we can. So we have a question here, and we have some other questions. I'd like to get some audience members in. Yes,
Hi,
sir.
my name is Andy Goldstein. I hope I'm alive by the time the sewer plant is. But I have a question for both candidates, actually. My law firm we represented the Maidstone Arms, and we prepared an overlay district proposal which would have put all the 6 inns under actual regulation and given them some leeway to expand, such as having music and other things. So my first question is, and the outgoing mayor proclaimed that dead in the water as my partner stood up to present it. But so my question is, since there's going to be change in January for both candidates, would you entertain that proposal, at least to discuss it and see if it would fly, which I see no reason why it wouldn't. The other question I have is, one of the detriments or one of the problems that businesses have expanding their operations is the fact that in addition to having to get a variance for parking, the variance comes with a cost. If a variance is granted, you've got to pay $10,000 a spot. And the way they compute parking is you're not grandfathered for your pre-existing non-conforming parking. So the numbers, any kind of expansion runs, someone would have to pay $100,000 or so for 10 spots or whatever, money which essentially goes into a fund to buy land for parking. So tell me where that is. In any event, would you consider, and now all variances have to be considered on their own merits, but would you consider at least abandoning that parking fee, knowing, and also amendments to the code to recompute how the parking detriment is computed, so that the businesses at least would have the ability to change uses a little bit, expand a little bit, without this economic problem.
Let me say, we plan to do a bunch of political debates in 2020.
It's not a political question.
No, I think it's a fair question. I think it does fit the program, and so I'd ask you both to answer it without it turning into a political debate. Let's keep it on the topic of the general concept.
Okay. So that's what this is all about, to address some of those things, and certainly it can be up for discussion. I don't have a problem with that at all, and it may well come to that. I know there are board members that are amenable to having a discussion about that. So it's very possible that I'll be expecting it.
Well, I'm sure everybody knows where I stand. Certainly, I would be agreeable to helping the historic inns or any other non-conforming pre-existing location. The parking. The archaic parking situation doesn't allow you to open any business because there is no parking. You have to pay for every parking space. And according to the village, through a recent FOIL that I did, that parking fund is empty. There is no parking. There is no money. And that parking lot that the village just paid for on Osborne that they made a big deal about was $1.1 million for 20 parking spaces with a 2-hour limit that no one can use and no one has used. So that's $55,000 a parking spot. So, yeah, I'm in favor of fixing the zoning code. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Question from the audience, Rick? Please. Go ahead. In the back, yes.
So, my name is Gusty Folks. My husband Jack and myself own the Mary Marvelous building here in town. For most of us don't know, but there are 8 apartments in that building. I know we're trying to make this town a little more customer-friendly and town-friendly. We're trying to achieve getting some seating in part of the Mary Marvelous building, which the village of East Hampton actually prevents having any seating, where the town of East Hampton has a very specific code under takeout food store where you can actually have, with a retail zoning, 16 seats. Now, we have upgraded our septic system to the tune of $200,000 so that we comply with Suffolk County Health Department. And yet, in this village, we can't, and everyone knows who goes by Mary's, they're sitting in the window seat. And everybody uses Mary Marvelous in the morning, but nobody can have actual seating there. So I think with just a little modification of some of your local laws, we could, in fact, really invite people into the stores and have them comply or have us comply with your zoning. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
I'd welcome that conversation.
Thank you for that. I think back here, Virginia.
I'm Greg Mansley, long-term resident, originally just in the summer and now year-round, between New York City and here. I'm listening to the attitude in the room. I've done 25 years of Teams negotiations along with what I did. Pardon me. Anyway, what I sensed, and something you've heard me say before many governing boards, okay, and people in government, you need to govern with a sense of reason, all right? Listen Listen to the attitude. Let's start on not an adversarial. Case in point, the Plaza building out in Montauk. About 2 years ago, undertook the marketing of that particular property, owned by a long-term resident, all the hockey sticks and such. In any event, went to the town board, went down to the town board, went to the building department. So let's start, before arbitration, let's have a conversation, all right? We sat down, and within a week or two, we created 6 stores, all right? It's all been built now. It looks terrific. It's working fine. It could happen here. You have some bigger spaces that with rent at so much per square foot year-round, it's not working. But they are marketable if you segment them possibly, to the point you have 6 apartments in your place. So I think that's part of it. We all should be working together on this and get the right people doing the job together. That's all.
Okay. Thank you for that. Other questions? Yeah, we got one right here.
I think the gentleman touched on something where he talked about attitude. And I've been doing business in this town for 35 years. And I can tell you that whenever I run into somebody who's coming to see me in my business and they have a yellow ticket in their hand, they say, you know, I'm paying $40,000, $50,000 a year taxes in this village, and it's not a very friendly place. And I think the attitude part is where we have to start. And it's not going to happen with the current board because they've had 20 years to fix this. And it's just been going down and down and down. And I think that unless we all get together and collectively do something about it, it's going to continue. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. My name is Jennifer Wilson. I grew up in East Hampton, and my parents owned a toy store on Main Street for 18 years. I came here thinking of 3 different ideas and points. One of them is I don't see a way back to mom and pop shops particularly. Unless you, in the central business district here. But other favorite places of mine are, for example, the town of Aspen. And you go to Aspen and there is always stuff going on in the village. They have a similar situation. All the stores are very expensive, high-end stores. There's a few mom and pop shops sprinkled in and out, but it's basically very similar to here. What they do is they have a lot of events going on in the village, on the sidewalks, in the park. The park is very small compared to our park and does not have the amount of parking that we have. So Herrick Park happens to be surrounded by 2 gigantic parking lots. And then for overflow, you know, if we were to allow some more events going on, whether it's music or whatever it is, it should be not just once or twice a year. It should be almost every weekend that there are things going on in our parks, in our park. We want to bring our children into town. One thing that I saw in the last couple of years is they have a little football league for kids, flag football. There are so many local families that go to our park on those nights, and then they go out to dinner afterwards. That's one example of bringing people into town and utilizing the village. The other thing that I think is, in regards to music, having music, that just open doors and hearing music. I agree with Nancy, and everybody, I'm sure, agrees that would bring life into this village. And incorporating our local high school students. East Hampton High School happens to have gotten awarded one of the top music schools, public music schools in the country. So bring these kids in and let them perform. The other idea I have is, and this is old school East Hampton, is when the fire department would go and flood the town pond. And in the winter, there were families ice skating on town pond, and then they would come to town and have hot chocolate or what have you. Those are a couple of ideas that I think are very simple to bring back, and I have to say that I really commend the Chamber of Commerce for what they've been doing recently in the town.
That's what I want to throw it to Steve Haweeli to talk about this. Is it as simple as just we need to get more people into the village for something to help the businesses. Is that one of the answers? Is just giving people a reason to come to the village beyond just the day-to-day? Has that been the Chamber's approach?
Well, the Chamber has a sort of a multi-level approach. Number one, we do want to get people into town. We also want to support these businesses in the village. So we just felt if we could bring people into the village, that there's just people right at your doorstep. So it's up to the business owners also to embrace when there's a street fair. I don't think it's that's just the silver bullet, though. I think that there has to be a governmental change. And I do hear that Rick has some challenges with 85% of the village being residential, but I think that the very character of this town is at stake, and I think that's already actually been established. So that Jennifer's idea of bringing more music into town and flooding the parking lot using Herrick Park is really that's an easy fix right there. It doesn't address the core answer, the core solution, but it's a start.
Okay, can I
just recently, just to go to Terry's point and Steve's point, you know, the Chamber's working very hard at bringing people in. And here we have a fall festival, and there's 5 TCOs out writing everybody parking tickets for overtime parking. There's got to be some thought in the process so that if you're going to have this big event, we need to waive the parking for the day. We need to have some thought into this. If the village is serious about helping the businesses, then they need to take those steps. Jump into the film festival. Film festival, how many people and how much money does that bring to our community? Again, no parking waive, parking tickets. So you're doing all this hard work, bringing people into our community. How many people are going to come back when they wind up getting an $80 summons for coming to your event?
Okay, we have another question in the back.
Hi, my name is Randy Johnston. I'm new to the community. I moved here in April. And one of the first things I noticed right away was when I walked around the village, which I do most every day, was the lack of recycling. There's not a recycling container on our village streets. Obviously, there are a lot of things that need to be done, and a lot of the ideas and suggestions here that have been made have been really great, but I really don't see how the current administration is going to do anything about any of these things if they can't do something as simple as put a recycling container on our village streets.
Okay, fair enough. I think, ma'am,
Can I address some of these things that have been said, please?
Rick, quick.
As far as parking is concerned, there's only so much parking in the village. We are bound by the comprehensive plan not to buy residential property for parking. That's why we bought that piece of property on Osborne Lane, because we needed more parking on that end of Newtown Lane. There's no way we were going to get it with anything that was for sale nearby there. We bought that property. So we're very restricted by the comprehensive plan, which cost us a lot of money to produce. So it doesn't pay for us to just go off willy-nilly and ignore it. That's what it's there for. We have another comprehensive plan coming up very soon. Those issues can be addressed in that.
Okay.
As far as parking, some people think, where did this 2-hour figure come from? That we just made it up. That's not true. It happened before I was on the board, but the story that I'm told is that the store owners, who were owner-operators, wanted 2-hour parking because it was too easy for employees to go out. If you made it 3-hour parking, it was too easy for employees to go out and switch the car out to a different spot. All the employees were taking up valuable spots for the stores. And if you go out there now, there's plenty of parking in the lots. But when we do away with the parking limitations on January 1 of this year, and you go into those lots, they're going to be all filled up with employees of the stores. And that's fine if that's what people want. That's fine. But then it takes up parking for your customers. So you need to think about that. The 2-hour limit was actually requested by business owners at the time that it was set up. And again, that was before my time on the board. But we just didn't pick a figure out of the air and do that. So it was at the request of
people to do. So, yeah, the board is open to conversation, and we're willing to work with you as much as we can. Again, knowing that whatever we do is going to be vetted so that all the residents have a chance to have a say.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Yeah, hi, Barbara Layton here. So it's fantastic the conversation has begun, and obviously we need to keep it going. It's quite evident that what we're all yearning for is a year-round sustainable community for every single one of us. Myself, Jerry, and a number of other residents and business owners in the community have begun the East Hampton Village, what's it called? East Hampton Village Collaborative. And that's exactly what it is, a collaborative where business owners and residents can come together at the table and figure this out. We're not creating an us and them environment. We're creating a we environment that's going to work for most of us. So I invite all of you, before you leave, to please either get in touch with Jerry, get in touch with me. We'll let you know when the next meeting is. We've had 2 already. And we're ready to just go. And little things can absolutely start the change that's needed in the community. So thanks.
All right, let me give this gentleman here a second.
Terry Wallace again. I was here when they instituted the parking, and it was done by the town board, and it wasn't really so because the business owners complained. At that time, we had a lot more activity on the street, particularly because you couldn't get a movie pass on the internet. So I used to own the David's Cookies next to the theater on this side and Nuts About Chocolate on the other side, where I had an art gallery down in the basement. And the people would line up down the street, and that's when they decided that there was just not enough parking here. It had nothing to do with the store owners. The store owners, even now, after January, like Rick said, the lot will be full. They had no objection against it. What we need to do is we need to figure out a way to change the parking. Because, first of all, when someone receives a parking ticket, they go to the town and they pay for the ticket. And we lose 50% of the money, or a high percent. I could be a little less than that, but we lose a percent of it. Plus, we're paying the insurance for the TCOs. We're paying their salaries. We're paying for the insurance. We're paying for all of those things, but we're not getting very much back. One of the things that would help us if we had our own justice court in the village of East Hampton, that we would get 100% of the money, and that would help pay for some of the things like the septic system that we need to do, okay? But it's not going to happen with the way things are going. Thank you.
Can I just say that we've researched our own justice court. It's a very, very expensive proposition. And after the research we did, the figures just didn't add up. That's why we don't go to our own justice court. The state decides the spread in what we get back on our tickets, and so much has to go to support town court. But we did do some research on whether or not we should have our own justice court, and the numbers just didn't make sense.
Okay, let me go to the back of the room, Councilman David Lease.
Good afternoon. I'm East Hampton Town Councilman David Lease. I grew up in the village of East Hampton on Newtown Lane. My parents had a store in the 70s called Fleur de Lis. I'm a commercial property owner in Amagansett in the town of East Hampton, but I'm here as a person that really loves my hometown and specifically the village of East Hampton tremendously. I want to take this discussion just a little bit differently if we can. I think a lot of people are talking about what can we do for the village as far as businesses. I understand flow rate tremendously. I understand parking tremendously when you have to go into applications. But what happens is I think one of the things we need is to have the people to spend money here year-round. Not just come in here, but live here. How can we do that? Through the state Senate and Assembly right now, another 0.5% transfer tax has recently happened. That can potentially be to purchase affordable housing. What is the village going to look at? Do we try to prioritize where the properties are? Are we going to specialize and spotlight these properties? How are we going to take that on? Can we actually add on density on the properties? Philip actually brought this up earlier. Do you expand the village a little bit? In the overlay districts, do you actually look at properties that are already pre-existing non-conforming? Does the village want to purchase those then too? Do we have to work with the town also? I just want to see what the panelists' thoughts are about trying to get affordable housing for not just for affordable housing doesn't have to be for youth. It could be for seniors also into the village walking district. And how do we do that? Do we prioritize these properties? Is that's what the RFP is going to be that was put out in July? How can we get more people to live within the walking district that will open up their wallets?
Who would like to field that? Jenny, we haven't heard from you for a while. Would you like to? You don't want to pick that question, all right? Somebody else want to?
Maybe Philip?
It's in this RFP.
Okay.
Presented in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'll David, thanks for the question. I'll address it. I addressed it kind of earlier. I think the village should be the one purchasing the property up by the train station and creating the mom and pop affordable stores. And then above it, I think we should have workforce housing where we can create and allow families to live. And that will have those people spending money in those shops and walking into the main village and spending money there as well. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And I agree with that also, but you need a willing seller to sell that piece of property. And
Kropinski's is for sale right now.
No, and in addition, you need a septic system for the flow rate, for the density. So it's a multi-layered approach. And I don't think anybody disagrees with the idea of adding additional workforce housing. It's a basic, intelligent idea, you know, expanding the business district so you have more shops. As you get further away from the center, the rental rate drops, so it becomes more affordable. The gentleman who said, you know, perhaps smaller stores, thought that was a great idea. But again, it all starts, unfortunately, with the septic system.
No, I agree, but you know, it's the process that I'm a little frustrated with, because the process just started in 2019. So, or we could even give you 2018. I think that's the first time it was discussed at a village board meeting. So it took us 22 months just to get an RFP out for a study. So I would suggest if you go to like the town board, they've been talking about this stuff since 2014. So I don't want to see it take that long. I have ideas. I think we can move it forward faster.
Let me give Robert a chance.
To address the second floor apartments, I have explored some of that over the years. It all comes back to the septic system. That's what it's always come down to. Addressing the smaller stores, which is a great idea. A few years ago, the village, if there were 2 stores in a building and it became 1, the village prevented that. They then reversed that decision and they've gone back to what it originally was. But there are still opportunities within the village to further subdivide, which is a great idea. Their holdback on it has always been parking issues. So again, it comes back to health department and parking.
We're coming up on 2 o'clock. I'm going to let you have the last question.
Darrell Godfrey, I work for the other paper. I live off of Osborne. I pass by that dumb parking lot that nobody parks in, and I pass by the middle school, which has a huge parking lot behind it, which nobody can park in. Why can't we utilize the parking lots behind the schools during the summer for shoppers?
No, yeah, that sounds like a question for Rick, right?
That
is it. Let me let Rick pick up the microphone.
No, it's not a question for the school district. It's a question for village government, because.
Well, let's let Rick answer it.
Well,
I want to give him
first.
a chance.
Ultimately, it's a question for the school district. They're the ones that are going to make the decision. Yes, people do park behind there in the summertime. I know that. So I don't know what kind of enforcement they do or anything. That's their property. That's their business. Can we talk to them about it? Sure, we can talk to them about it. But ultimately, no, because it's their property.
Years ago, when I was chief of police, we did have an agreement, and employees from the village stores did park back there. I don't know what happened in the interim, but all it takes is to pick up the phone and call Rich Burns and talk to him. That's all it takes.
Okay.
It's a great idea, by the way.
Coming up on 2 o'clock, I want to get everybody out of here. Because I know time is a factor for everybody. I want to give all of our panelists a chance to give a round of applause. And let's just very briefly, Rick, I'm going to let you start, and we'll just come this way. Just a final point, and maybe the final point that I'd like each of you to answer is, so we've had a lot of conversation today. What do you think, if there's one priority to address the core issue here, which is about the vitality of the village, if there's one priority that needs to be to take the focus, what should it be? Rick, I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, well, I think there's actually two. I mean, the sewage treatment system, which we've been working on, and the parking, which is difficult. If it were easy to solve, it would be solved already. I'm hoping that the new comprehensive plan is going to find ways that we can address that. And again, whatever we do is going to be thoroughly vetted with residents of the village. That's who we are sworn to serve. So I'm talking about business district and residents as well.
Okay.
And we're amenable to discussions. I think that's the key here. And I think the perfect example of that is our recent discussions with the chamber over this fourth event that we're having on Christmas. It went very smoothly. They got no resistance from us. They were very productive conversations, and I think we can continue that. And I would let you know that every one of the village board members has an email on the village website. You can contact us at any time. I'd be glad to talk to anybody here if they want a further discussion, and that's the way it should continue.
And I just want to make the point, too. The press sessions, the express sessions are about fostering this kind of conversation. It needs to be picked up. Jenny, real quickly.
I think that the takeaway here, there's two things. I understand that the septic system is a massive undertaking. Nobody expects that to be done, next week. Same thing with the parking. Where a lot of my frustration lies is sort of like the unfriendly kind of atmosphere that I think has been fostered over the last 20 years. I don't find our village government approachable or amenable, and I think that that's the first step, right? We have to be able to voice our concerns and then see some action from the board, not just send me a memo. We'll discuss about it. We'll take it under advisement. There's nothing wrong with trying something and abandoning it if it doesn't work, right? There's lots of solutions out there. There's lots of really intelligent people in this town and in this room, and we need to sort of like come together and treat this as a community problem. And then we can get a new
Hopefully
septic
this
system.
is the first step of doing that.
Yeah,
so.
hopefully.
Jerry, real briefly, the priorities?
Very briefly, the friendliness is key to this whole thing. I mean, you have store owners getting summonses for that little puppy dog on the front porch with an open sign on around his neck. It was all in in your paper this week. I mean, it just needs to be friendlier. It needs to be back to the community. I agree. And the important thing is we need reasonable change. Right? We need reasonable change. I mean, that's what we need. And we just can't stick with the status quo.
Okay, thanks. Joe, your thoughts?
I think we really, one of the things that kind of sticks in my head is affordable housing out here. People that are working in our businesses out here just can't afford it anymore. Our youth is leaving this community, and those are the people that are going to spend money in this town. The seniors, go on, a limited, budget. We need to figure out a way to keep these kids in the town and get them working in our restaurants and in our stores. And there's no site for that as far as I could see. I have 2 kids coming out of college, and I'm looking at watching these kids leave this town. So I think that's a big point that we need to, keep our eyes on.
Okay. Steve?
Radical change.
That's simple. Okay. Philip?
I think it all stems from the septic, and from there we'll be able to accomplish the parking, the workforce housing, the expansion of the commercial district, the expansion of restaurants, and I would like to see the live music too, so that'd be great.
Okay, and Robert, last word.
We know the septic and the parking is important, but I want to echo what Jenny said, that we need a more collaborative working partnership between the business community and our local government. Baby steps can add a lot to this, and a lot of small little things, and I love something that she said, which I've discussed with them also, is we can try things. We're not that big and cumbersome. This isn't Manhattan. We can try things. If it doesn't work, we can fix it.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I want to thank everybody for coming out today, and to thank our panel for a lively conversation. Joe and your staff here, thank you to them. Wonderful job. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to LTV for their efforts. And we look forward to seeing you again in 2020 when we do some more of these. Thank you.